Hi everyone, it's Chenzo from RealityArtPod, here to give my week 3 player rankings on Big Brother 26. As always, my ratings this week are weighted against my ratings from last week, so if you missed my previous videos, I put a link in the description so you can catch up on my previous rankings and recaps. These are my rankings based on where the game stands after Thursday night eviction, so spoiler is in effect for that eviction. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing, it really helps the channel, but let's dive into it. Firstly, we have to say goodbye to sweet Kenny K. Coming into this week, I had Kenny in dead last with his piss poor position in the house and wanting to quit the game. He comes into this week, tells Cedric that he wants to go home, and tells Cedric that he used to be a cop, his big secret out of the bag. Things improve slightly for Kenny, being in the right place at the right time to form the ball player alliance with Cedric, Tucker, and Cam, an alliance that was making big plans that if executed correctly, would have made the other players in the alliance a big target and put Kenny in a really good position. It was weird that he both wanted to go home and stay at his own convenience, and I'm glad that he was eliminated here and not dragged to the end. Coming into this week, obviously Quinn is going to use his power unless anything crazy happens, which it very well could. Quinn has basically laid out that the following players are in danger this week, so they're basically fighting for safety in 3 competitions: the HOH comp, which would basically just give them immunity from being nominated, the veto comp, and the AI arena. In 13th, I have Mackenzie, who last week I had at 12th. Mackenzie came into this week with her power, and not too much else since she's been working on relationships that aren't really going anywhere. She started the week off by giving Cedric the same threats of, if you nominate me, I'm just going to use my power and take myself off. And after conferring with Chelsea, Cedric ended up deciding that he was going to take the risk and nominate Mackenzie anyway. She was going to take being nominated and save her power for this week, risking being on the block until all of the drama at the veto ceremony spooked her into using it, which is probably for the best because had she been on the block against Tucker or Kenny, they might have used their brains and voted her out with her power in her pocket. I was expecting her to still have the power this week, but she doesn't, so she joins the mere mortals at the bottom of the pecking order. I will say that of the people not in the collective, she has done the most actual work to try to integrate herself into the house dynamic by telling people about the power, getting social and active in groups, cooking for the other house guests. So I think she's capable of saving herself with her competition ability and social game this week, but despite her best efforts, nobody's including her in their plans moving forward, which makes her an easy person to kind of fling out this week if she's on the block on Thursday. In 12th, I have Angela, who was 13th coming into this week as a bit of a house pariah and consensus target, despite having really no power or alliances. She had the information about Quinn's power, and I was expecting her to at some point go around spreading that, but she really kept it quiet. Last week, she told Tucker about Quinn's secret, and that was a really smart person to tell because it sent Tucker on a chaotic spiral that would lead to him exposing Quinn to the whole house and start a bunch of drama in the house that for the most part really had nothing to do with Angela and lowered her threat level. Somehow this all turned the narrative to Angela was right all along and nobody believed her, which could be a step in the right direction, but nobody still wants to work with her, and she still has had some kind of drama every week so far. But she still remains the only person in the house to make a successful big move, and I think she still has the potential to go far in the game if she can ride it out, but I don't think people want her in jury. I think she's most likely to be on the block at the end of the week this week. I'm just not so confident she'll be voted out this week. In 11th, I have Tucker, who last week was 8th. Tucker came into this week in a pretty decent spot in the house. He was well liked by everyone. He was still pretty avoidant to pick sides and could have rode out a few weeks waiting for things to implode, as he also knew about Quinn's power and could have used that information at any time. He volunteers to go up as a pawn again while also suggesting to Cedric that he nominates Mackenzie to flush her power, and Tucker wins the veto. So far so good, and he decides he wants to shake things up by exposing Quinn's power, building a guys alliance with Cam, Kenny, and Cedric, and backdoor Quinn. So far so good still, if there wasn't a giant named collective alliance that Quinn and Cedric are both in. So this is where things go off the rails for Tucker. Cedric exposes this plan to the Pentagon, and Tucker wakes up in the morning ready to execute the plan. After being clearly told that Cedric wasn't going to nominate Quinn, he should have changed his plan and either saved Kenny or himself. Saving Angela was crazy, and in the fallout of the veto ceremony, he was just pissed and calling out Quinn and Cedric, all things that are going to make him a target moving forward. He said that he was bored and he wanted to jumpstart them playing Big Brother, and they did, because Wednesday night, the collective agreed that if Tucker was on the block after the AI arena, they were going to vote him out. Based on how good he is at competitions, I don't think he's going to be on the block at the time of voting on Thursday, but if he is, I think he's going home. In 10th, I'm putting Rubina, who was 4th last week. I was higher on Rubina because she seemed pretty protected from all angles, and I said she was unlikely to hit the block, but she was one of the names Cedric was throwing around as the 3rd nominee until Tucker volunteered. Part of that, I think he was trying to protect her, and I think she would have been fine if she hadn't hitched her wagon early to this crazy train that is Tucker, as their bond was one of the strongest assets she had and now is an anchor to her game that I fear the longer that he's there, the worse it'll be for her. Then they stepped their showman's game up, making smooch sounds in the bedroom where anyone could walk in after they had a few drinks. Give them more alcohol, you cowards. Her game talk is similar to Leah's as they start talking metaphysical and things get a little too ooky spooky and less gamey for me. I think Rubina could really benefit from either Tucker leaving or getting some kind of power in the next few weeks so people will start taking her seriously. But as it stands right now, I think she'll be one of the 3 initial nominees for Quinn. And if Tucker and Mackenzie win competitions, Rubina could go home this week. In 9th, I have Leah, who last week was 11th. She comes into this week maybe a little bit better than the week before because she voted the right way. She manages to avoid being nominated outright by Cedric. Again, probably more because of Mackenzie's power than by any merit of her own. Showmance drama continued with Cam, going from a potential showmance to him being pretty rejected and resentful of her, which ends up being negative to her game. She manages to be in a lot of conversations that I want to tune into, but she's always talking about astrology or vibes or telling long personal stories. And when she does try to talk game, she's pretty bad at it and can be really direct with people in a way that makes them not want to engage in game talk with her in the first place. Overall, the way that she's bad at the game and bad at competitions helps her out here because the collective is pretty set on keeping her around for the time being, as the women especially dunk on her and think she's a layup. And I don't think Quinn wants to nominate her at all this week. If she's around long enough to see her allies go home, she may be in a place to get a bit more ahead, though I don't see right now how she can really win the game. In 8th, I have Quinn, who last week was 10th. Quinn came into this week with his game on the brink and he didn't even know it. His game continued to get worse without him knowing, as knowledge of his power spread through the house from Tucker to Cam to Cedric, each time issuing what feels like a poke at the balloon that is his game. While he didn't know he was in such jeopardy, he built a stronger bond with Joseph, revealing their mutual superfan status, which could either be mutually beneficial or destructive, as Joseph called Quinn a lying rat, but Joseph worked to bring the collective band back together, which really helped Quinn to mitigate the damage caused to his game by being put on blast by Tucker. The other players in the collective also knew Quinn was going to hijack the HOH next week, and it was in their best interest to protect Quinn and keep him around, as it's basically immunity for all of them the next week. He also further buried himself by outing the Pentagon Alliance to T-Core and Chemo. As things stand right now, Quinn will most likely hijack the next HOH and get all the blood on his hands for the nomination of Mackenzie, Tucker, Rubina, and Angela, maybe Leah, unless he really trusts the person who's HOH to the point that he would just not use it. For the most part, I think he's pretty safe this week. The bad is that through all this, the players found out that Quinn was lying, and some people don't seem to care, but Cedric and Cam talked about letting the power pass and then targeting Quinn, so he's in mid to short-term danger from a lot of these players. In 7th, I have Cedric, who last week was also 7th. In my mind, he's been steadily falling a bit. Last week, I felt like Quinn was secretly going to use his power to turn on Cedric, but Cedric wins this HOH, and after Chelsea's HOH, he could have played this so similarly. Chelsea was presented with big ideas, but she played it safe. Cedric starts off getting the subtle threat from Mackenzie that she'll use the power if nominated and would become an enemy to him. Then he meets with Kenny, who tells Cedric that he wants to quit and that he's an ex-cop. Cedric then tells Kenny that he's an ex-military analyst. That was really bad. Like, why would you tell someone that huge secret and give them so much dirt on you who you're planning to send home? Cedric didn't use his HOH to actively strengthen his position in the house. The collective reunited, but that would have happened if anyone in it were in power. Cedric happened to benefit from it. He and Cam were involved in the scheming with the ball players, and he just played that so terribly in actually leading Kenny and Tucker to believe that he was going to backdoor Quinn that night. He totally led them on and not only becomes a short-term target for Tucker, but through this potentially puts him on Quinn's short list of targets once again after Quinn deals with some bigger issues he has going on. In 6th, I have Cam, who was 6th last week, another player who's steadily dropping in my mind but stays the same in number. Last week, I criticized him for the weird no-mance with Leah, and that's continued to spill over into this week, which is continuing to make him look bad in and out of the house, and the women in the house continue to see him as sketchy. He joined the short-lived but kind of real ball players alliance with the men, and that was just messy gameplay. Overall, I think the whole series of events that played out around the veto plans were just bad for everyone's game that was involved. They make themselves out to be targets and give people a reason to come for him in the future. He continues to be a messy player, but never does anything positive in the game besides being in the collective and the Pentagon. If the house dynamic shifts from that one setup, I don't think he ends up towards the top of the food chain. In 5th, I have Joseph, who last week was 9th. I've been downward on Joseph the last few weeks because I feel like he instantly took a backseat in the game, not really doing much, but throughout the week, he joined the Guys Alliance that, while it was highly unpopular on social media, was something that could really help his game. He also bonded with Quinn and some others around the house, which could prove really useful for him, and he put a lot of work into reorganizing the collective alliance, an alliance that, while he isn't really in a good spot in the hierarchy, is a big group that he can hide in for a while and build up some of the relationships that he's trying to form. So overall, this was a good week for Joseph. In 4th, I put Chemo, who was 1st last week. I ended on a high last week for Chemo, being impressed that he'd been in such a good spot and holding on to the most important piece of information in the game about Quinn's power. He was in the collective alliance with a side deal going with T-Core and Quinn called the Visionaries, which really seems like that was where Quinn's true allegiance lied. Chemo then totally spills the beans about Quinn's power to Tucker, and he and Tucker don't even talk ever. The only reasoning we get about this spillage was that Chemo has a crush on Tucker. That justifies by sending Kimo to horny jail. Bonk! This really gave up the leverage in his game and also exposed to T-Core that Kimo had not only been keeping secrets from her, but also playing in her face, speculating about who had the power when he knew the whole time, which made her doubt him and start to make other plans on her own and be open to the idea of playing the game not as a unit with him. I do think he and T-Core will continue to be in a good spot in the game and work together, but there were too many mistakes to keep him any higher this week. In third, I have Chelsea, who was also third last week, and overall, I feel like she played it safe yet again this week. Her buddy Cedric wins HOH, and she advises him to make similar nominations as she did, and she's involved in the reuniting of the collective, but with all of the drama about the veto, she's largely left out of all the mess and to her own benefit, as it made everyone else look bad and made her look like a steady ally, exactly what someone in her position should want, considering she's in the core of the house, and nobody's coming for her anytime soon. In second, I'm putting T-Core, who was second last week. T-Core was in a good position to start the week, and for the most part, remained steady, but also didn't do much. She wasn't involved in the veto drama, and when it was all said and done, she ended up looking really good, having been lied to by Kimo, which strengthened her relationships with other players. As I said earlier, I feel like she and Kimo will have their relationship no matter what. She's in the collective alliance and maybe still has the visionaries with Quinn. I remain tempted to make her number one, but I'm waiting for her to do something big. In first this week, I'm putting Brooklyn, who was fifth last week. At the end of last week, I was fearful that Brooklyn was getting lost in the shuffle and there were murmurs of the men targeting her. I said she needed to squat up and quick. This week saw the formations of men's alliances that all ended up completely blowing up on their own. This put many of the men's games on blast and greatly benefited the women in the collective. Not only is Brooklyn in the newly strengthened collective, but she's also very loyal to the Pentagon Alliance, and through that, she's playing a pretty clean game so far. If the Pentagon or the collective fall apart, there are way bigger targets than Brooklyn that people are coming after, and she's really going to light up in the end game. They are really dumb for having overlooked her the last few weeks. I was mostly impressed that she decided to round the collective up Wednesday night and really run that quick meeting like the Navy, where she led the group deciding that they wanted to target Tucker and agree to save the replacement nominee in what I would consider a great power play because Tucker is a great player, and it was nice to see her get to work and get stuff done in the house. And even though that plan didn't work out, it's really good for her that Kenny got evicted. So those are my rankings for this week. If you disagree with my rankings, I'd love to see your rankings in the comments. I read all of them and I always respond. If you like the video, consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel. I'll be back next week with the challenge premiere, recaps of week 4 of Big Brother, and another play ranking. Until then, have a nice weekend. Bye.